too, but there is this atmosphere of, we will give you a little bit of information and we'll give you a bit more when we're ready, and we'll vet it.
And it's all about control, do you feel?
Yes, I think so. If we look at the technological side of the UFO subject, there's been talk for many years, for decades in fact, of back-engineered craft that have been downed, etc. They admit that they now have craft in the States, and that's why a threat was made against my life in 2018, because I was at a UFO Congress in the States where I spoke, and I was speaking about technology, alien technology, that experiencers have seen, and the corroborative evidence that I'd collected around that. So they don't want experiencers anywhere in the world talking about alien technology that they may have seen and used, because if a link is made to some of the technology that's coming out in our world now, then questions are going to be asked as to who's making money out of it and where is it, where was it, where did it come from? So it can be quite dangerous in this field.
Today, I'm joined by another Suzy, Suzy Hansen, who started out as a school teacher and a grief counsellor. And for over 40 years, Suzy has been deeply involved in UFO research, sightings, and investigations. Now, the author of The Dual Soul Connection and founder of UFocus New Zealand, a nationwide research organisation, Suzy has interviewed thousands of people uh, about UFO sightings, close encounters, and metaphysical experiences. Also lecturing nationally and internationally, her work featured in the media of 60 Minutes to UFO Truth magazine. So, Suzy, you've done a lot.
I have. It's actually 50 years in March that's just gone by, so we're just over 50 years now.
Wow, go you.
Mm.
That's a good few years in this really fascinating genre.
It is a very intriguing genre, and when you get into the subject, it's very difficult to get out because of that fascination that you feel for all of the new information that's coming forward and has been coming forward for decades. It's quite unreal, really.
So, where did it all start with you? From what I understand, you had some early sightings when you were a child. Tell us where it all began.
Well, when I was 8 years old, I was a Friday night, and I was with my family. And my father went out to close the garage and came running in and said, "You better get out on the front terrace. There's something out over the Bombay Hills." We were in Pukekohe, south of Auckland. And so we all raced out there and had a look, and sure enough, there was something that I would describe as like a long glowing ruler in the sky, a long rectangular or possibly cylindrical shape. And it was glowing bright orange, and every now and again it would flare, even from the distance we were from it, which was about 22 kilometres, I suppose. You could see a real flare happen and then go back down to this glowing bar. Now, we knew, of course, that there was nothing man-made, certainly not New Zealand, that could create something like that, and it hovered in the same place for an hour and a half. So we also don't have something that could do that and that looks like that. So this was absolutely intriguing to me, and my parents got the neighbours to come out on their terrace. So there were quite a few families out on their steps, etc., and watching this sight over the Bombay Hills. After about an hour and a half, it started moving, which caused great excitement because we didn't know where it was going to go next. And it just moved very slowly down towards the Waikato. And it was reported in the New Zealand Herald either the next day or the day after. My mother showed it to me, and it had actually been sighted by hundreds of people. In later years, when I set up the Ufocus NZ website, I put a little report of that, what I'd seen as a child, and asked people to contact me. And I've had several people contact me over the years saying, "I was here, I was there, I was in Pairata, I was out Pukekohe North," or whatever. And or I was on a farm with my father shifting cattle and we saw it too. So that's really good to get that corroborative evidence and the fact that it was in the newspaper. And I think that experience, I couldn't get to sleep that night. It kept me awake for ages, just thinking about, well, what was it? Because my parents were saying it's a flying saucer, which was the terminology we were using, along with UFO. And and so my mind was saying, well, who was flying it? Who was in it? Where did it come from? And and I guess that really captured my imagination for years afterwards. And I never forgot it. It was like it happened yesterday.
Wow. Um, can you describe some of the most significant encounters you've had since then?
Well, I had a very significant one when I was 20. I didn't really have anything in the way of sightings up until then. I heard about sightings that other people had had. In fact, I kind of kept my ear to the ground during my teenage years. But when I was 20 and I was a young teacher in Hawke's Bay, my flatmate and I went down to Waipokoro, south of Hastings, and I was going to a farm, family friend's farm, and he was dropping me there and then going to a friend of his who had a farm. And we were going to be there on separate farms for the day, and he would pick me up about 4:30. So when he did, he said to me, I'm going to go home via the back highway, not through Waipokoro, Waipawa, etc. And the back highway runs along by the Ruahine Ranges and over some riverbeds, and it was a more bit of a remote highway that mainly farm traffic used. And for some reason, I felt as if my sort of stomach lurched when he said that, and I didn't know why. So we got in the car and off we went, and we'd been traveling for about an hour or so. We were coming down from a slope and down towards a flat riverbed, a couple of kilometres long. And as we were coming down towards that, we saw these lights on the hills ahead. Two lights, bright white lights side by side, just naturally thought those were the landing lights of an aircraft, and then they seemed to switch off. And we thought, well, the plane has changed direction. We can't see them anymore, but they appeared adjacent to us on the hills next to us. Um, we drew the car to a bit of a halt or like second gear, crawling along, braking, looking, and they disappeared again and reappeared exactly where we'd seen them the first time. And then they flicked out. So my flatmate was saying it's a helicopter, it's a fast-moving helicopter, and I'm saying fast-moving helicopters are not instantaneous from one place to the next. And having had that sighting as an 8-year-old, my mind was open to the possibility of it being a UFO. He was a scientist and didn't want to know about that. So we proceeded in second gear, starting off again, feeling quite safe at that point that whatever it was had gone. And then he said, oh my God, that whatever it is, it's coming up behind us. And I stuck my head out the window to see, and there was an elliptical shaped light um, coming up behind us, wider than the road, only about 50 feet above us. It came right over the top of the car. It filled the car with glaring light, so bright that it was painful. And then this noise came, like a grinding noise that descended from a high-pitched noise down to a guttural grinding sound. And I don't remember any more. I remember looking at him and seeing that he was no longer conscious or driving the car. And then I felt the car lift before I passed out or whatever. I felt the car lift off the road, just like you do when an aircraft leaves the tarmac and leaves your stomach behind. And then I don't remember anymore. The next thing I remember is it's pitch black. I don't know where I am. I feel as if I'm floating. And then I'm in the car and it hits the road. The lights come on. My flatmate seems to wake up and is frantically trying to control the car over a one-way bridge at the end of the straight, the other end of the straight. It's pitch black. And we had no idea where the rest of the afternoon had gone from 4:30, 4:45, late afternoon autumn sunshine to pitch black. And when we got home to our flat, we found that we were 90 minutes later than what we'd expected to be. Our mouths were dry. But we were sweating. We didn't know what had happened to us. We couldn't make any sense of it. Um, he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't talk about it for weeks. And every time I raised the subject, he got extremely angry, which is sometimes a reaction you get from people who've had a sighting or an encounter. And eventually he left the flat. So that was a period of missing time and a sighting that turned into something that was much more.
Did you ever stay in contact with him again? Did he decide to talk to you about it later on?
No, I lost contact with him, and some years later he died in a bus accident in Hawke's Bay.
Ah, okay. Wow, that's a really big experience.
Hmm.
It's quite
And
powerful.
And that's what really catapulted me into sighting investigation and even looking at contact because of the fact that we had that missing time, and if it was a UFO, what happened to us? That was the big question. So as a young woman, I started independently talking to people in Hawke's Bay area who'd had sightings, and wherever I moved after that, I did the same until I moved to Tauranga and joined the UFO research group there with the late Harvey Cook.
Mm. And tell us a little bit about in New Zealand at the time. Were there quite a few encounters in that decade?
The 60s in New Zealand, particularly the late 60s, were a time of huge sightings. You know, we had the Ngatea landing, we had in the late 50s, the Eileen Moreland experience and sighting. We had the airport sighting, the aerodrome sighting at Waipukuro, in fact, in the late 60s, and a lot of others. So that was a time of, we were just we'd moved out of that time for the early 70s. And then, of course, in the late 70s, this was 75, this happened to me. And of course, in 78, we had the Kaikoura Lights and the Gisborne UFO Flap, where I was living by then, up in the Gisborne area. So I copped it again up there. So there was a great deal going on. New Zealand has a very deep and rich history of UFO sightings, and fortunately, we have all of that documented in our archive, and a lot of those sightings are actually known worldwide. When you go overseas and speak over there, people say, "Oh, tell me about what happened. Do you know? Have you got any extra information about the Eileen Moreland sighting or whatever?"
I really would love to know what are some of the most outstanding experiences that you've heard of in the over your lifetime.
We've got a lot of the major sightings, which I'm not going to include because they're well documented. There's a lot of them in New Zealand. They're on our website. People can read about them. But I'll just go to three sightings that briefly really were stunning. One was by a New Zealand neuroscientist who was out fishing late at night, about 11:30 at night, and he felt as if he was being watched. We all get that feeling sometimes, especially if you're out on a rock in the middle of nowhere with your fishing line at 11:30. So he turned around, just turned around occasionally, and he saw these like lime green eyes. They're quite large, and they were moving around. He couldn't see the body that they were attached to, but in the dark he could see these luminous eyes, and he thought, "What the hell
Mm.
is that?" And he was quite brave because immediately in his scientist's minds, he began, from his knowledge of the beach and the cliff behind it, he began working out the distance from him, how wide set the eyes were, how wide apart they were, so therefore how big the skull was, and all of this. And thought, oh, it's quite a large head, and they've got some big green eyes, and blah blah blah. About 50 meters away from me, and he turned around, carried on fishing. At some stage, he turned around to see where the eyes were, and he actually saw them floating up the cliff. And the next minute, something lit up on top of the cliff with two blinding white lights, like headlights of a truck. So he thought, oh, maybe someone's climbed up on a rope and maybe there's a truck up there. And but no, it took off. This big object took off with all lit up past him, went 300 meters or so out to sea in front of him, and turned around as if it was looking at him. the lights shining towards him and stayed stationary, airborne, in front of him, not far above the surface of the sea. He carried on fishing for a little bit and then started to think, oh, what's going to happen next? So he really quickly threw all his gear in a bag and took off. And on his way back to the car park at the beach, he turned around and it was still there, but it had changed its light configuration. It now had a different lighting set. So that was an interesting one, very credible sighting. And we had 3 hunters out the back of Tauranga here in a place called Oropi. They were out on forestry, on a farm that had some forestry on it. They'd been hunting and shooting possums, and in the distance over a hill a couple of kilometres away, they saw a bright orange light. They thought it must be a light on a truck or something like that. And then they saw some bright white lights and it started moving backwards and forwards, apparently over trees. They thought, well, it can't be a truck then. And then they realised it was actually coming towards them, getting bigger. So they hightailed it down the race road and the farm, got down into a bush area that the gravel road went through. And this object came down, dropped its orange light, and it now took on a different lighting situation. And what got right down almost to ground level and was following them through the bush, like making entrance ways, going into areas where there were little clearings, trying to get to where they were. Eventually, they got to a high point with where there was a clear view over the paddocks. It was dark, but they could just see in the night light, and it appeared out over the paddock. And within seconds, it was right beside them, underneath the bank, right beside them. They were terrified, so they flattened themselves back against the ferns on the side of the race road, and it went down the paddock and started coming up the farm road towards them. One of them dropped his rifle and his phone and was fumbling around on the ground for it, and it came up to within meters of him. His son was with the group, and he called out and was very afraid, thought it was going to run over the top of his father. And the moment he cried out in fear, it just slowly backed off and went over a rise and disappeared over the paddock. So to cut a long story short, they ran as fast as they could out to the road, and at that point, 2 of them ran off down to the vehicle. 2 of them stayed by the fence to see if they could see anything. And they saw this entity floating down with a light on its forehead. It went and it landed in amongst some gorse bushes, waist level gorse bushes. They could see its features and its body. One of them felt it was calling him and he was trying to get over a barbed wire fence. The other one pulled him off, and they eventually ran down the road, sat in their car for 20 minutes, terrified with no lights on, not knowing what to do. So we went up and went right up through the property to where all of these things happened individually with them, so that they couldn't feed off each other's comments, individually interviewed them. Took a long time, and a very, very interesting story. One of them was a teacher from Auckland, and his reasons for he didn't want to speak to us at first, and eventually he did, and explained his reasons why. So there's been a lot. There's a family who saw a landed craft on a beach in Northland, and they were in a batch. And they watched entities walking around on a beach that didn't look human, but had humanoid figures. So we individually interview people, get them to do drawings, and record it. Sometimes it goes on a website. Sometimes they ask for it not to be on there. So that's okay, but we never use a person's name.
Mm.
So we have a lot of stuff in New Zealand that people see, and it's no different from overseas. It's happening all the time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my viewers are international, and I think hopefully this conversation will get them to go and explore a little bit of what's been happening in their own backyard, which would be great. Do you find that once someone has had one encounter, that they'll often have a second?
Yes, that does happen. Not with everyone. Sometimes they report it and you never hear from them again. But others will send you photographs and say, "What do you think this is?" And I'll say, "Well, that's a lens flare, or that's a lantern, or that's an aircraft with its lights, landing lights on." Other times we don't know what it is, um, or it's too blurry or distant to ascertain. But yes, people will sometimes have start to open up in a strange sense where they become hypervigilant or hypersensitive to these things. And some of them have multiple sightings, and some of them eventually report a contact.
Is New Zealand what you call, I'm just phrasing this, a hotspot for this, or are all countries around the globe, did they all have periods like this?
Yes, it's commonly known in our terminology in the research field as a flap, where there's a real increase in sightings and even contact within a certain period of time. It's as if someone decides to take a slice out of time and study us during that time. And that's not to say that some of what people see is not our own secret technology. That's always the case, but there are largely documented sightings on objects that can move in ways that we have not developed yet, or if we have, the public doesn't know about it. So you get these kinds of reports and flaps worldwide, and New Zealand is no different than anyone else. It's just that we're a far away country and we're only quite small with a small population. So it is surprising that we have so much activity, but on the other hand, it seems like a good environment if they want to have a base here somewhere or study a smaller community would probably be a good place to start. South America, for example, the countries in South America are very, very open. The governments, the military, the aviation groups, they are all quite open to the sightings. It's not treated in the slightly derisive way that it is in many Western countries.
Well, that's interesting. Why is that, do you think?
I don't know, just something about their mentality or their attitude towards it. They actually welcome it and are intrigued by it. And shortly, the Brazilian Congress is going to be holding open hearings with some of their researchers, civilian researchers, coming forward with their information and sharing it with them. So it's very open. It's happened in other countries in South America as well.
And are the sightings, is there a correlation of um, similarities that happen? Have you found that? I mean, you've spoken to thousands of people now, and are you seeing repeat patterns, perhaps people having contact or being taken onto a ship, or perhaps the shape, you said the shape of the ship was,
Mm.
or whatever you saw, what you believed you saw was a elliptical, and that very first one was sort of an orange color. Are there are there commonalities that crop up?
Yes, there are. Some of them are in the way that they move, which separates them from our usual aviation means of travel. But there are patterns right across the board, both in the contact field and in the sightings. And I'll give you an example, if you like, of a stockman working on a sheep station in New Zealand who contacted me very excitedly one very cold morning, and he was sitting at his kid's computer and he was looking at UFO stuff because he was elderly, but because he had had an extraordinary sighting as a younger man on a sheep station in Wairoa. So some of these patterns that we're talking about are that often a person who's having a sighting finds themselves either paralyzed and not able to move, only their head and eyes they're able to move. That seems to be a common factor with some witnesses of UFO sightings, but also people who've had contact. And so he was frozen, but not only him, his horse was frozen and didn't move, and all the dogs, which had been a team of 6 dogs, which had been barking and racing around, were all stock still, pointing in the same direction, and he saw a cone-shaped craft we'll have to call it that, it wasn't an aeroplane, coming up a ridge towards him. And it moved around a bit, didn't harm him in any way, but he was able to watch it. And then it went down the ridge line along the valley and eventually disappeared. And when it disappeared, all movement came back again. So we have these patterns that happen. It's sometimes called the Oz factor, where you freeze, you get this otherworldly feeling, you in some kind of altered state, you're quite relaxed, you can see what's happening, but you're not in a state of terror if you're put into the altered state. There are a lot of patterns in the shape of objects, how they move, what they do, what they seem to be looking for, or whatever. So there's ample research on that, which, of course, long time sighting investigators and researchers have been trying to get governments to listen to for a long time.
Have you had people that's a very beautiful classic sighting from a classic New Zealand farmer
Yeah, it
who's
is.
probably salt of the earth person who would just think, oh my goodness. Okay. You know what they're like, you know what
Yeah.
we're like.
Yes, he was
Um,
too scared to tell anyone for a little while, but when he heard that a prize bull had gone missing, completely gone from a back paddock that no one had access to and wasn't seen from the road, he decided he'd tell his boss at the station what he'd seen, in case it was related.
Gosh, did they ever find the bull?
No.
Wow. Okay. What do you think the purpose, what do you feel the purpose is of the interactions with humans are with us?
Well, if we put sightings to one side for a minute and we look at the contact phenomenon that's happening worldwide and has done for decades, many people have had contact report that the ETs have told them they're really concerned about our use of atomic power, nuclear warfare, and the interest and the upswing in UFO sightings occurred after the Nagasaki Hiroshima bombs were dropped, and so we are probably seeing. I think generally scientists accept now, most people accept that we're not alone in the universe and in the Milky Way, um, our galaxy. So taking that into mind, if we are making forays out into space, sending satellites out, sending probes out, etc., we've established a space station and all of that sort of thing. So we're looking at going further out into our solar system to start with. But we're still a warfaring civilization, and I think that's the main thing that they're concerned about, is how far we're going to go and whether we're going to harm any of them in the process. It also signals to them this movement forward in our technology, but not only that, the mindset that goes with that warfare technology. And that's, I think, from everyone that I've ever spoken to in the last 50 years, that's what they mainly talk about, that concern that we're going to do harm out there and that we must evolve and become more spiritual and compassionate and use technology in the right sense before we can have open contact, or they will just stop us. And there's ample evidence now. A good friend of mine, retired Captain Robert Salas in the States, who's just been talking to the Congress over the years about his experiences as a captain in the military in the US, and how in the Malmstrom Air Force incident, a light came down over the base and it shut down the Minuteman missiles, nuclear missiles that they were testing out, raising them up from underground. So there's ample evidence of UFOs appearing over military installations like Rendlesham, and are very well known in the UK. And the message is, you can't do this, we will stop you.
Um, that's interesting. Yeah. And they have stopped. They have stopped it. They've called a halt to it in the ways that they can. But they're quite benevolent ways. And I think I do want to touch on this because I think there's always been a fear mongering out there of what their intention is, but I think they could be more fearful of us actually in so many ways. Are they educating us, in fact?
Yes, many experiences of contact talk about how they've been taken on board craft since early childhood. They've received all kinds of education, much of it in the psychic abilities to do with consciousness, being able to move objects, manifest objects, all kinds of experiences, but also learning about our survival and the ecology on the planet. Many scientists and professionals have had contact experiences, and many of them are coming forward. If we look at Gary Nolan, who's a very well-known scientist in the States, he has come out with the fact that he has had contact experiences. And it may well be that many of these scientists and professionals have actually received information that they don't necessarily relate to those contact experiences, but which just come out in their research and in their studies and provide them with this added information. So we don't know how long this has been going on, but many experiencers talk about this education that carries on and how it carries over into the work that they do in their day-to-day life.
And you've been doing this for a long time. You've been documenting other people's experiences and being a sounding board really for them. I guess they came to you because you'd had an experience and you'd talked about that.
Well, sometimes,
Uh,
oh,
mhm.
sorry.
No, go.
Well, sometimes people, if they've had a sighting, sometimes they just pass it off. Oh, that was interesting. And they might tell their family or a few friends or something. There might be a few reactions to it and they drop the subject. But others are very afraid of having a UFO sighting. They are terrified of it, and they're desperate to find someone to talk to who might understand. So that's when we get our customers coming to UFocus NZ, talking to us about the kinds of experiences they've had here in New Zealand. I also receive a lot of sightings from overseas as well, and I refer those back to other researchers. But it can be confronting, and it depends on the person's upbringing. It depends on their faith, their religious faith. It can depend on a lot of aspects of the person's personal life as to how they react to a sighting or a potential contact experience. And many times people will contact me and say, I've had a sighting, but I'm not sure whether I should tell you because, I don't want you to make fun of me. And they don't understand that we've been doing this a long time, and this is why we do it, because it's intriguing. It's futuristic. It has all the mystery around it. It's a very intriguing subject, and the deeper you get into it, the more correlations you find, the more patterns, and the more corroborative evidence that you find contributes to those understanding of those patterns. So, for example, I had one day a very Christian lady contact me who'd had a sighting out of her bedroom window one night up Waihi, and she was terrified. She didn't want to talk to her church because she thought they may feel that she had seen something that was demonic. She didn't know how it would be received, so she spoke to us about it, and hopefully we allayed some of her fears. But a person's background can have a deep influence on how they react to these situations.
I guess it can be quite isolating too if you're younger and you disclosed your whatever you saw or experienced with your parents and then they shut you down. It can be really isolating for people, I suspect.
Yes, it can. And I've had periods of time where I experienced that. At the beginning, when I was coming to understand some of the sightings and contacts that I had had. But another example is I was speaking in Australia at a conference, and at the question time, and I really love the question time. This elderly couple put their hand up and they stood up. They gave them a microphone, and they said that they had actually seen this conference advertisement that there was going to be someone speaking about contact worldwide. That was me, and They said they came along because they wanted to come up to me afterwards and tell me what they thought of me, which was not nice, because they said that their daughter had reported to them that she'd had these kinds of experiences and they didn't believe her, and they told her to leave home, and they told her they didn't want to see her again, and she disappeared. They hadn't seen her for 2 years. So they came to listen to my speech and they were going to basically blame all of this on me. Um, and so you could have heard a pin drop in the auditorium and they were crying, and they said after listening to you talk about what people experience and how it is, we're going to go straight home and we're going to try to track her down and say please come home.
Oh,
We believe you. So it is life changing. It's worldview changing to have even just a UFO sighting can have a dramatic influence on a person in their life. And very often, people who've had contact experiences or sightings suddenly have a wider vision of the world and their place in it, and they start looking at the environment and what they can do on a personal level to assist the planet. And so often they move careers, they move somewhere else, they do all kinds of things. It has so dramatically affected their worldview.
that's a really beautiful, positive outcome for all of us, actually, if that does happen. But you've also had pushback, haven't you? And there's been a lot of, I mean, we know there has been a lot of cover up. There's been at governmental level and around the world in different places, and there's just non-disclosure, if you like, in a big way. And also, um, I mean, it's been a bit dangerous at times too, hasn't it, to speak out? Is that
Mm,
correct?
absolutely correct. Researchers worldwide, there's been researchers and experiencers who've died, who've been threatened. I've been threatened. So the will to keep going has to be fairly strong. A lot of people fall by the wayside or take minor roles, if I can put it that way. But people who come forward with these experiences, especially in the decades gone by, have been very brave because they have faced huge derision, not just from family and friends and workmates, but if they've gone public at all, that they've really suffered for that. We are in a period of time now, which is like a period of examination, and so we've got people who the general public look upon as being credible because they've got a degree or they're a scientist or they're a pilot or whatever. And that's okay if it brings people into the subject and they find those people convincing simply because of their qualifications or their profession. That's fine. It's a good thing. But what about all the people who are just ordinary, everyday people who've talked about these things, who've done newspaper interviews and been decried for it? So people are threatened out there. The agencies are busy in the States in particular. I have been threatened, I've been taken aside, I've been warned. I've had my house watched here in New Zealand. I had my house entered and it was nothing was taken, but it was entered and certain signs were left to show that this was a warning. So this kind of thing has people's health has been affected. Um, all kinds of attempts on people's life. This is a subject where you have to tread warily, and if you're going to go public about anything, you have to be aware of the consequences. And this leads me to say this is why in New Focus NZ we're totally confidential. We have permission from people to talk about a sighting, like I've talked about a couple in this interview, but I haven't given names, etc. But we would never divulge a person's name or profession or anything else like that. Um, it can be a dangerous thing, and it has proven to be so worldwide. And even David Grush, who's one of the whistleblowers in the States, who came forward talking to a congressional hearing, he was then threatened after that. His family was threatened. He's been put under protection. So someone has a very vested interest in trying to keep this under control and trying to keep people who are talking about it under control. Um, For example, on one of my trips speaking tours in Australia, I found I couldn't access my money and I had to borrow money off the conference organisers. And when I went to the airport, a lady turned up in a suit and a clipboard and talked to one of the security people at at the gate I was waiting at. And it was quite clear she had a photograph of me on the clipboard because they looked at the clipboard, she was pointing, and then they looked all around the people who were waiting at the gate, and their eyes settled on me. And she came straight over to me and, in a rather sarcastic voice, asked me how had I accessed money while I was in Australia. This is just a little survey I'm doing. So there's these slightly intimidating things I've had, certain situations where my photo has been taken from a distance and then someone's rung me a few days later saying we've got your photo and being intimidating. And so this is something many researchers have experienced worldwide, and it tells us that someone doesn't want us talking for a very good reason, and that reason will probably center around power and money.
Mm. I think we're all aware of it. Thankfully, there's been a lot more. Do you feel that there's been a big increase of openness to the subject now, though, on a grassroots level?
I
Yeah.
would say, as someone who's deeply in the subject here and internationally, I would say there's the appearance of openness
Mm.
happening. We have an appearance of openness. Um, but we see, for example, at congressional hearings, we see some people who should be speaking, they've been sidelined. And it almost looks as if some of the people speaking have been selected by various parties. Um, and we're seeing this now with some of the scientific conferences happening in Europe, UK, and the US, where there's no mention of contact. It's all about military sightings. It's all about carefully doctored and presented material. Not all of it. There's some very genuine people talking too, but there is this atmosphere of we will give you a little bit of information and we'll give you a bit more when we're ready and we'll vet it.
And it's all about control, do you feel?
Yes, I think so. If we look at the technological side of the UFO subject, there's been talk for many years, for decades, in fact, of back engineered craft that have been downed, etc. They admit that they now have craft in the States. And that's why a threat was made against my life in 2018 because I was at a UFO Congress in the States where I spoke, and I was speaking about technology, alien technology that experiencers have seen, and the corroborative evidence that I'd collected around that. Um, and Lou Elizondo, who's become very well known in the UFO field, rose to fame at a meteoric speed, which I'm always suspicious of. Um, and he was speaking later in the day. So they don't want experiencers anywhere in the world talking about alien technology that they may have seen and used, because if a link is made to some of the technology that's coming out in our world now, then questions are going to be asked as to who's making money out of it and where is it, where was it, where did it come from? So it can be quite dangerous in this field.
Do you think, what's is your feeling though, that this can be overcome?
Yes, it can, but you know, the dark side of the subject, the whole threat side, is very real. But it is only a part of the subject, and hopefully there's going to be enough momentum going forward with new discoveries. For example, the James Webb Telescope is producing some amazing stuff now that's making scientific firsts. So we are moving forward at quite a meteoric speed as well, and I think there'll be a lot of people fall by the wayside as more information comes out. We're going to have to go through a period of sifting and sorting because there's been so much information kept under wraps worldwide for so long but to bring that information out now is like an admission. And so we're seeing whole new things appearing that can't be challenged. This is a new thing. The James Webb or astrophysicists have discovered this, or scientists have discovered that, and we don't question it. But it may well be based on research and evidence from way back that they're just going to keep quiet about, and they're just going to present it as new stuff moving forward. And that's
Um,
okay, it will move us forward, but by the same token, imagine how the people who've been researching this for decades feel that many very well known and very capable researchers and sighting investigators worldwide have just been sidelined, just like that, sidelined.
it's really tough.
Mm.
And there's also quite with entities, a different races, if you like, of intergalactic beings that are talked about and explored on some level. There's often reference to one lot being the Greys. And can you tell us anything you know about this race of, do you want to call them a race? A race
Species.
of beings.
Species.
Yeah, species. Yeah. Sorry.
Um, yes, well, I'm involved in study internationally. So I belong to ISA, which is a coalition of researchers, academics, scientists, and long-time investigators like myself. I think we represent about 35 countries now. And so there's a lot of research being done within our group and other groups that I belong to, people I talk to worldwide, about this. So we have commonalities that are described by experiencers, contactees, whatever you like to call them, abductees, other common phrases. And the greys are the species that they seem to talk about the most. But they also talk about other strange species that are on board as well. And some of those have copped, people speaking about those other species have copped a lot of flack. I can imagine when you mentioned that someone has seen a mantid being, like a praying mantis, you're probably going to hear the laughter for hours. But in fact, hundreds of thousands of people report that. And when you see these patterns and commonalities shared across the research of experiencers from far-flung countries like Finland, etc., down to New Zealand and everything in between, then I think we need to take some notice as to that. And then, of course, we have got some of the former US agency members who've gone public about their own contact experiences. And I'm thinking of John Ramirez, who's a former personnel in CIA. And he actually came out and said there's three main species, groups, sorry, of ETs visiting us. And he said there's the visitors, we've met them. And that was quite a phenomenal statement for him to make. Who's met them? And then he said there's those who live here, mainly underground, and we've met them. And he said, but then there's these others, these interlopers that we believe are flying the Tic Tacs that have been talked about in recent years since 2017 from naval footage. And he said, and we don't know who they are. We need to find out. So that's coming from a former CIA member, indicating that we, collectively, we could be governments, could be military, could be agencies, could be contactees, experiencers, have met these groups of species. So that was quite a big statement to make.
Okay. So there's actually a lot of knowledge, recorded knowledge, if you like, that's out there of this species. Wow. And it's an interesting word, abductees, isn't it? Because it sort of sounds quite, it sounds again quite controlling, but I sometimes wonder if these words are entirely appropriate. Do we, on some level, make a contract to go, okay, put your hand up on some spiritual level to go, okay, I'm available, come, I'll be there. And we
Yeah,
might not be totally conscious of that, but yeah.
I think that just a personal belief of mine is that we all make a contract before we come here to experience something. And maybe contact with alien beings is just one of those things that we make a contract about. Um, I think some of the terminology that arose, a lot of people are seeking to replace that or modernize it, I'll put it that way at the moment. So the term abductee applies to experiencers or people who've had contact who had some kind of negative experience. Um, and a lot of research has been done internationally on that group of people who've claimed to have had contact. And we found that many of them have changed their mind about that. They've actually realized as they've got older that that it was their attitude and their fear of the unknown that made them react the way that they did. And they realize that they haven't been harmed and they've actually learned something and it's transformed their life in some way in a positive sense. But there are still people who are traumatized by what they've experienced. I was traumatized by my car being lifted off the road for quite a while before I sort of got talking to other people and started to calm down about it. That was pretty frightening. So I think that with the deeper understanding that we're starting to gain from research now and talking to a lot of people um, in just about every country in the world, this is part of their what happens there to some people. So we're looking at different terms. I tend to call people who've had contact of some kind communicators because they've communicated with another species that is from somewhere else, and it rises above those quite divisive um, terminologies like abductee, etc. Experiencers evolved from abductees because they said, no, ours were positive. We don't want to be called an abductee anymore. In the modern day today, people are calling themselves contactees, and they're largely younger people, and they don't have got no idea that contactees were people who had contact in the 50s and 60s. So they've kind of grabbed that terminology, but it's already taken. So there's a lot of confusion out there, and there is a need for new terms to come out of it that are more inclusive.
Oh, I think that's something you should be doing. I think it's a good thing. I agree because words are powerful and they can sway whole people to ways of thinking, definitely.
Mm, they are.
Um, yeah. What do you love about your uh job, shall we say it, as an investigator of this? What's the great thing you love about it?
Well, I suppose as a kid, I enjoyed science, but it wasn't something I followed in life in my career really. Um, but I do love it, and I suppose something that attracts me to this is the fascinating aspects of the subject, the descriptions, the information that is coming out and has been coming out for years. It's the intrigue and the mystery of the subject, and a desire to find out, get to the bottom of it, and that probably may not happen for decades for humanity, and I'll be gone by then. But I love the fact that I am able to contribute something to that research, both in New Zealand and overseas. Um, I guess I love to talk to the witnesses, particularly in New Zealand, but in all of the countries I've spoken in, love to talk to the witnesses there too and see some of the cultural differences that come out in their dialogue about their contacts or their sightings. But I really love working with people in New Zealand and hearing some of the stories and the humour that Kiwis sometimes inject into their sightings that they've had, and the questions they ask that spurs me to go and ask other people and look into the subject. The other thing I love is all the scientists I've met who have been working underground on this subject for decades and didn't go public about it because they were afraid of their position and their credibility and their grants. Um, Some of the scientists I have met who've been able to fill in a lot of gaps for me in terms of some of the scientific aspects of the sightings I've investigated. Um, and the people I've worked with, I had four wonderful gentlemen working with me in New Focus NZ for between 20 and 25 years, and slowly each of them passed away, leaving me and one other. So we're looking for some more investigators around the country at the moment, but they were air traffic controllers, pilots, and engineer and a scientist, and they were very fine people, and they'd had sightings themselves, and they were brave enough in those aviation professions to step into this arena as well and take part in some of the documentaries that we've been a part of, etc. So they were very brave to do that in the early days. It is a mind-blowing subject. There's lots of aspects to it, so you can follow a lot of trails in this subject, not just scientific ones, but looking at consciousness and telepathy, altered states, all of that kind of thing that crosses over into the contact side of it.
Do you think we're moving into a little bit more acceptance of telepathy and some of those other sensory perceptions that we have? Are we evolving? Do you feel like we're evolving, humanity on the whole?
Oh, definitely, we are. And sorry, I forgot the first part of the question, but
It was a little bit about telepathy.
yes,
Are we getting there?
yes, I
Yeah.
think so. Um, we all experience telepathy to some extent. Like you might think about a friend, and 10 minutes later they ring you. So is that telepathy passing between you, thinking about each other? I would say so. That's part of consciousness. But science has not understood consciousness or even accepted it for a very long time. And now, of course, everybody's into it. And if you want to speak at a conference, you've got to have consciousness in the title of your job, your speech description. So it's become a household name just about, but I don't think we really understand what that consciousness is. Many experiencers, abductees, contactees can tell you about what consciousness is like to communicate with an extraterrestrial species, and we haven't reached that stage, but we will do eventually, I'm sure, because our technology is pretty much leading us that way. We now can move a cursor with our mind. You know, people who have disabilities are able to use a computer by using their brain signals. So a lot of research is being done at Berkeley University, paid for by DARPA, which is an arm of the CIA, incidentally. And they're researching all kinds of telepathy and how the brain creates images and all that kind of thing. So we are moving towards being, in the future, a more telepathic society. But we are opening up, because of the James Webb Telescope images, we're opening up to the fact that there's trillions and trillions of planets out there that could sustain life. And to think that we're the only ones anywhere is just absolute nonsense. But we have to make a lot of changes in education. Is the education we've been doing for a long time appropriate in this day and age anymore? What do we need to insert in there, and how do we cover all the bases anymore? You know, teachers are expected to teach all sorts of things now, um, and hospitals, the medical system, the technology that we use is all advancing, and you know, our legal systems, will some of the things apply anymore? um, how do we copyright brainwaves and ideas that are picked up
Mm,
telepathically?
mm,
So there's
mm,
a lot of stuff to work through. And people who think that maybe the ETs are going to land on the White House lawn next week or in a year's time, they might be right. I don't know. But given how much we have to work through and progress through and evolve through, I would say no. They probably don't want to come and meet us on a grand scale while we're so warlike and have some of the attitudes that we still have. We've got a way to go
mm.
yet.
Unless, of course, we push our boundaries, unless they have to intercept to stop us from ourselves,
Yeah, stop us from blowing up the planet.
Yeah.
Really, I think they've been studying us for so long now. There's plenty of research about that. That they probably have everything they need to recreate us if they wanted to. That's just a supposition on my part. So really, I think the planet is the thing that they want to conserve. Because if this planet blew to pieces, it would affect the whole solar system and everything
Of
beyond,
course.
probably. And so there's other civilizations it may impact on. So the planet would survive beautifully without mankind. All the animals would survive beautifully without us. So we really are the disaster factor on the planet.
And I guess that knowing that plays into the fears of well, of the Armageddon style narratives that we get out there. Yeah.
We have huge potential as a species, but we have to overcome the wars and the lack of compassion towards each other. And also, we have to have a greater understanding of what's behind many of Earth's religions, because they will also be impacted by all of this.
Mm, mm. Your book concludes with the idea that humanity is being prepared for galactic citizenship. I love that phrase. I think that's a really beautiful way of seeing us. Um, what do you feel that might look like?
On a personal level, I think it might be that if we start to clean our act up a bit and, more people take on a more spiritual perspective on their neighbours and other people in the world, then we will have a rise of frequency and or vibration, if you want to put it that way. But frequency will rise, and we'll see a lot of things improve. It's like the hundreds monkey, where the hundreds monkey tips the scale and everything changes. So, it could be that, but it could look like a species coming down and guiding us. That's what it could look like. And there's a lot of experiencers and contactees talk about that eventually when we reach a certain stage, or if we've reached a point where we're in danger from ourselves and nature, then they may come down and give us guidance and assistance. But I don't personally think it would be a control and takeover, which is a fear factor threat system that a lot of people are pushing, particularly in the States. Because if they wanted to do that, they'd have done it a long time before now. Why wait until we're in a mess? They could do it at any time. I think it's more likely to be like someone guiding kindergarten children to do better and to learn more, in
Mm,
a guidance situation. Because if we accept that we're not alone in this universe and the massive amount of universes that are apparently out there beyond us, if we accept we're not alone and we enjoyed Star Trek, then maybe we've got some hope that, yeah, someone will help us out at some stage when we show that we're willing to be helped and we're not going to attack them back.
mm, mm. I mean, it does feel like we're at that stage now as far as we're on the cusp of, oh, it could go all very pear-shaped and wrong amongst us. So you've just said we're not probably going to have open contact yet, but maybe we will. Maybe we
We,
will.
we may do. It's just simply my opinion at this very point in time, particularly with who I've been speaking to on Zoom recently. Um, it would have to be a disaster situation that they would come in to help rescue people, I think, and rescue the situation. But they want us to start doing that before they come in and do that. I think from everything, the messages that many experiencers have received, it's about us learning to help ourselves. Because as a teacher, I know if you spoon feed kids information and they don't know how you got to that point or got to that result or answer, they don't have any understanding. They're just repeating it like a rabbit. But if they have to go through the process themselves and fix it, and make it work, then they understand it. And that's the situation we're in now. A lot of people are saying they have to come and help us. And people say to me, why aren't these beings who are on these UFO sightings that you investigate, why aren't they helping us? Well, they probably are in the background. We just don't know about it. But isn't it our responsibility to help ourselves?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So fascinating, Suzy. As I said, I think this was the longest list of questions I've had for anyone here. But thank you so much. And where can people find you? And if there are any burgeoning investigators out there who really want that role, where can they find you?
We have a website which is www.ufocusnz.org.nz. They could just type in to Google Ufocus NZ and they'll find us. They can send us a message there. That my email address is there if they want to send a longer email, report a sighting, ask us questions or whatever. Yes, we're looking for some more investigators, but they have to start on the bottom rung. I've had a few who wanted to be on the top rung immediately, but it doesn't work that way. Um, it there's a bit of learning to do in the first place, and if people are willing to do that, then I'm willing to talk to them.
That's so exciting. And I'm going to put all your contacts also in the story notes. So they will be there. Beautiful to talk to you today. I have a feeling if we progress the way that we're progressing, I'll probably want you back for comment.
That would be
But
lovely. Thank you for having me on.
thank you so much.